Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing abrupt climate change. And it continues apace. Bringing you more evidence today that the catastrophe is ongoing and coming at us very quickly. Had a good comment / question from a viewer. James Jones asked, so do you agree with Guy McPherson that this is it for us? Don't know if he was just asking the general population, the comment section, or me directly. But it was a good question and had some good responses. My response was, I don't agree or disagree. I see his prediction as one of the many possible outcomes in the next few years. And that's just leaving it open to variables. I don't know. I mean, it could happen this year. It could happen next year. It could happen the year after that. It is soon upon us. So, the end is nigh, or whatever, however you want to think about it. And he could be wrong in his prediction this year, but, not necessarily next year or the year after. So one of the very good responses to this question was from Stephen K. Just to clarify for everyone, Guy, in his How Long Do We Have video, states that people's demises depend on whether there is an ice-free Arctic in early summer this year, July, or September. Early summer this year equals 6 months to live for most people. September equals the following summer. He sticks to his prediction of near-term human extinction in 2026, which means that most people like you and me would go far earlier. Preppers, the rich, people who live closer to nature will be the ones who would make it as far as 2025. Remember, extinction by a certain year means the last member of a species dies the previous year. I've seen a lot of confusion lately saying he is saying near-term human extinction this year. No. He's saying that the beginning of loss of habitat will begin this year and people will start dropping like flies as a result. Valhalla nails it. The worse things get, the more we will try to lessen those effects and make ourselves more comfortable, which will just make it worse. Too many people doing too many costly things equals disaster. There are simply too many things that can go wrong. Still, I personally remain in the I don't know category. I have emailed with Guy many times, and he has been very generous to me with his time. I think I was one of the first to receive his September prediction a few days before he posted the video. I was shocked that he was saying that soon. In a previous email in March, I asked him some percentage questions. He believes 90% ice-free Arctic this year, 99% next year. I will not disclose what else we've discussed. What do I honestly believe? I honestly believe we, meaning most people, make it through this year. I really do. 2019, 2020, then we'll be playing with fire. And that, I enjoyed that comment. That response, I think, sums it up. Trying to find Valhalla's comment that he was referring to. I think I remember what he was saying, but I don't want to be mistaken. Something along the lines that the hotter it gets, the more we'll just be cranking up the AC and then we'll have major blackouts. Oh, yeah, sorry, it was right above. Do not go far for your answer. Young Squire. The good Dr. McPherson has been premature on his predictions before. He said last October would be it. Well, we got another year. I think he might be right this year because it is already very hot and became hot sooner than normal. In my honest opinion, all it takes is everybody running their AC full blast to trip an antiquated electric power grid. I think that will be the kickoff for us. Major parts of the country without power in the heat of an abnormally hot summer. Right. So, yes, extremely true. That will be the response to, things getting hotter, is that people will be running the AC in their house. If that goes out, they'll be running their cars, running the AC in their car. If we're in extreme temperature land, imagine being in 110 degree heat, or a heat index of 110 or 115, and people just absolutely losing it. It was not too long ago that in Europe they had a major heat wave, and I don't know what the numbers were. It was like 3,000 people died. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was more than that. They just didn't have the faculties or the infrastructure to deal with it, and they didn't have the AC. They didn't have, or the AC went out. They had power failures, et cetera, and people went down. And yes, we've been seeing high temperatures already in major parts of the globe: India, Pakistan, Middle East, the East Coast of the United States, Midwest of the United States. We've already been abnormally hot. On the West Coast here, we had an abnormally hot winter all the way up to New Year's. It was ridiculous. We didn't really have a fall. We just had an extended summer. Summer just went all the way to December. Then we got this kind of like whiplashy cool thing. I'm concerned. I'm worried about how hot it will actually get here this summer, but maybe we'll be spared. I don't know. About the ice-free Arctic thing, it's anybody's guess. I just read something. I'm going to pause because I forgot to open up something. All right, I've got it. Moving from that prediction of 90% loss of ice in the Arctic this summer to 99% next year. This is from the Arctic News, Wednesday, June 13th. So last week, I didn't see it until yesterday. It was 6.6 C or 44 degrees Fahrenheit over the North Pole. I'm sorry, I'm going to go back. This is titled High Temperatures Over Arctic Ocean in June 2018. Over the North Pole, due to hot air flowing from Siberia over the Arctic Ocean on June 13th, 2018. Earlier, temperatures as high as 7 C or 44.5 Fahrenheit were forecast. At the same time, the jet stream crosses the Arctic Ocean and goes circular over North Canada and Baffin Bay. There's some graphics here. I will link this below if you all haven't seen this. As the combination image below shows, it was as hot as 32 C or 90 degrees Fahrenheit on June 11th on the coast of Hudson Bay. That is all the way up at the top of Canada. That is hot. Abnormally hot would be an understatement. The right panel shows the jet stream crossing the Arctic, while numerous cyclones are visible on both images. The combination image below shows that it was as hot as 30 C or 87.3 Fahrenheit at the green circle left on the coast of the Laptev Sea on June 10th, 2018. The right panel shows the jet stream crossing the Arctic at speeds as fast as 100 miles per hour or 161 kilometers per hour. That's in the middle of the Arctic, basically. Three ways in which heat enters the Arctic are One, heat is reaching the Arctic Ocean directly, i.e. air is warming up the water of the Arctic Ocean or is melting the sea ice from above. Two, rivers that end in the Arctic Ocean can carry huge amounts of heat. Three, heat is also entering the Arctic Ocean from the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. Feedback such as changes to the jet stream can further speed up warming of the Arctic Ocean. As the Arctic warms up faster than the rest of the world, the temperature difference between the Arctic and the equator decreases. The jet stream becomes wavier with longer loops that allow more warm air to enter the Arctic and at the same time allow more cold air to flow out of the Arctic. Period. The top image on the right shows that the sea surface in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of North America on May 29th, 2018 was as much as 9.8 C or 17.6 Fahrenheit warmer than 1981 to 2011. As temperatures keep rising, increasingly stronger winds over oceans are also causing more heat to enter the Arctic Ocean from the North Atlantic and from the Pacific Ocean. On June 4th, 2018, the sea surface in the Pacific Ocean near Bering Strait was as much as 7.2 C or 12.9 Fahrenheit warmer than 1981 to 2011, as the next image on the right shows. The next image on the right shows that water near Svalbard was as warm as 16.1 C or 61 Fahrenheit on June 4th, 2018 versus 3 C or 37.4 Fahrenheit in 1981 to 2011. Do you hear that difference that I just heard, that I just read? 3 C as opposed to 16 C or 37 Fahrenheit as opposed to 61 Fahrenheit. So it's almost double. That is insane. On June 4th, 2018, sea surface temperatures near Svalbard. The sea surface temperature near Svalbard was as warm as indicated by the color yellow on the image on the right, i.e. 16 to 18 C or 60 to 64 Fahrenheit. For more background on the warm water near Svalbard, also see the earlier post, Accelerating Warming of the Arctic Ocean. This heat will warm up the water underneath the sea ice, thus melting the sea ice from below. Furthermore, as the sea ice retreats, more sunlight will be absorbed by the Arctic Ocean instead of being reflected back into space, thus further speeding up sea ice decline. Oceans take up over 90% of global warming, as illustrated by the image above. Ocean currents make that huge amounts of this heat are entering the Arctic Ocean from the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. The right-hand panel of the image below shows that the extent of the permafrost on the northern hemisphere. The subsea permafrost north of Siberia is prone to melting due to the increasingly higher temperatures of the water. Increasingly high air temperatures are melting the sea ice, and where the sea ice is gone, they are warming up the water directly. High air temperatures are also warming up the water from rivers flowing into the Arctic Ocean, as illustrated by the left panel of the above image, which shows that it was as warm as 31.5 C or 88 Fahrenheit on June 15th, 2018 over the Katanga River that ends in the Laptev Sea. That's just ridiculous, man. If that doesn't scare you, I don't know what will. That is 90 degrees in the Arctic, period. That is 90 degrees in the Arctic, or near the Arctic. That is not supposed to be happening. That is extremely unusual. That is highly alarming. As the water of the Arctic Ocean keeps warming, the danger increases that methane hydrates at the bottom of the Arctic Ocean will destabilize. Methane releases from the seafloor of the Arctic Ocean can dramatically warm up the atmosphere, especially at higher latitudes. Ominously, very high methane peaks are increasingly appearing, as high as 2,900 parts per billion on May 4th, 2018. that's close to 3,000 parts per billion. 2,500 parts per billion on May 16th. 2820 parts per billion on May 21st. 2616 parts per billion on May 22nd. 3,006 parts per billion on May 27th. 2878 parts per billion on June 5th. And 26.5 parts per billion on June 7th. Mean global methane level was as high as 1,880 parts per billion on June 15th, 2018, at 254 millibars. Further, confirming that more methane is increasingly accumulating at greater heights in the atmosphere. NOAA records show that the average May 2018 CO2 level was 411 parts per million at Mauna Loa, Hawaii, while the hourly average peaked at well over 416 parts per million. CO2 levels are continuing to grow at an all-time record rate because burning of coal, oil, and natural gas have also been at record high levels, said Peter Chans, lead scientist at NOAA's Global Greenhouse Gas Reference Network, in a news release. Today's emissions will be trapping heat in the atmosphere thousands of years from now. Greenhouse gas levels are particularly high over the Arctic Ocean. CO2 levels were 420 parts per million over the North Pole, 420 parts per million over the North Pole on June 12, 2018. The situation is getting ever more critical as we've left the La Nina period behind and are now moving into an El Nino period, as illustrated by the images on the right and below. Given the above, it's amazing that the IPCC, in its final draft, the 1.5C report, insists that if emissions continue at the present rate, human-induced warming will exceed 1.5C by around 2040, according to a recent Reuters report. The final draft is now going to governments for their scrutiny, with the danger that the dire situation may be watered down even further. Governments should be urged to confirm that temperatures could rise dramatically over the next few years. Accordingly, comprehensive and effective action needs to be taken as described in the climate plan page. Governments should be urged to confirm that temperatures could rise dramatically over the next few years. Governments won't confirm that. If they do, I would be like, whoa, I'd be highly shocked by that. But if governments won't, that means people have to. That means, scientists have to continue to voice these concerns, and they will. The question is, how much will people listen? The question is, how much are, we and everybody who knows that this is a very likely possibility will be blown off like, whatever, man. Alarmism. But, when people are being inundated by floods, rains, hurricanes, fires, droughts, lack of food, lack of electricity, possibly that may be the time at which they are like, I wonder what's going on. What could this be? What could this possibly be? More on this is titled The State of the Climate. It's alarming. This is from Robert Hunziker at Counterpunch, June 15th, 2018. Stuart Scott of Climate Matters TV recently interviewed Dr. Peter Wadhams, emeritus professor, polar ocean physics, Cambridge University, and author of the acclaimed, highly recommended A Farewell to Ice, published in 2017. In response to the question, what's your assessment of the state of the climate? Dr. Wadhams replied, well, first of all, what I see is an acceleration of global warming because, for instance, the rate of rise of CO2 in the atmosphere is unprecedented. Not only are we not reducing emissions to the point where CO2 is stabilized, but the CO2 level is rising exponentially. It's going faster than it's ever gone before. And then there's the extreme weather events, which certainly have hit people in Europe and all over the globe. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, concern about CO2 is decisive. Today's rate of increase is more than 100 times faster than the increase that occurred when the last ice age ended. 100 times anything is big. Got that? Rate of increase. Big. That is an unprecedented rate of growth with profound and nasty negative consequences for temperature, climate, ecosystems, and species on land and in the oceans. Nothing good. In fact, it could unexpectedly turn ugly to an extreme, a dour fact few people want to face. Further to that point, nobody believes the worst case, but that's why society is always blindsided by catastrophes. Significantly and extremely important for the optics of climate change, the commencement start of disastrous climate change happens where nobody lives. Nobody sees it. For example, the Arctic, Antarctica, Greenland, Himalayan glaciers, headwaters for major rivers. Andes glaciers, headwaters for major rivers. The oceans, Patagonia. Nobody lives where climate change is most pronounced and clearly evident. Hence, and therefore, it is difficult for people to accept, realize, and deal with the impending danger hidden away from society until it is too late. Essentially, the million-dollar question, therefore, is whether this unparalleled occurrence of abnormally rapid CO2 growth on steroids triggers tipping points of significant, unstoppable, catastrophic events that ravage the biosphere. Regrettably, there are no backups. There's only one biosphere. For sure, paleoclimatic history is filled with examples of horrific consequences. After all, there have already been 5 major extinction events. We are at the 6th. It's just a matter of time. The first 5 extinctions. 1. Ordovician, 444 million years ago. 86% species gone. The Devonian, 375 million years ago. 75% species lost. The Permian, 251 million years ago, 96% species lost. That's almost 100. Triassic, 200 million years ago, 80% species lost. Cretaceous, 66 million years ago, 76% species lost. And today, unknown so far, except for unlucky insects. Already, extinction type numbers of 40% to 90% losses have hit insect abundance throughout the world, maybe chemicals at work, which is extremely concerning as insects do well without humans, but humans don't survive without insects. This one fact alone is a big time wake-up call, like Fright Night on Elm Street. Fright Night on Elm Street. Still, in light of the unprecedented rapid rate of CO2 as of today, nobody has experienced the likely outcome. Thus, a new era of climate change is commencing with uncertain consequences, but horrid, telltale signals extend far and wide. Firstly, it's important to distinguish the significant impact of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere as a heat-trapping GHG, or greenhouse gas. As, for example, the paleoclimate record of millions of years ago shows CO2 at 400 parts per million, temps at 5 to 10 degrees warmer than today, and sea level 75 feet higher than today. Whereas, in stark contrast to that scenario, 20,000 years ago, CO2 was at 200 parts per million, and sea level was 400 feet lower. It was the last ice age, the late Pleistocene epoch. It wasn't until a decade ago that science first discovered methodologies to effectively look back 20 million years to see the paleoclimate record. As reported in a paper by Aradhana Tripathi, UCLA Department of Earth and Space Sciences, during the middle Miocene, or Miocene, the time period approximately 14 to 20 million years ago, carbon dioxide levels were sustained at about 400 parts per million, which is about where we are today. Globally, temperatures were 5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit warmer, a huge amount. Clearly, when CO2 is too high, similar today at 410 parts per million, temps go up, followed by rising sea levels. Conversely, when CO2 is too low, everything freezes up. All of which begs the question of why CO2 at 410 parts per million today doesn't bring on sea level rise 75 feet higher. similar to the event in the paleoclimate record. In point of fact, it might do that in time, but the answer as of today has everything to do with the exponential rate of CO2 growth versus a much slower rate of CO2 growth millennia ago, the rate of change. Today's exponential rapid increase within only 200 years is a flash of geologic time. As such, temps need time to catch up with the rapid rate of CO2 growth. Therefore, a latency effect is at work, which implies an ominous darkness, very dark indeed, hovering over the future. According to Dr. James Hansen, the rate of human-made change of atmospheric CO2 amount is now several orders of magnitude greater than slow geological changes. Furthermore, supposing that there are lingering doubts about the direct relationship between excessive amounts of atmospheric CO2 and global warming, Venus's atmosphere is 95% CO2. Temperature is 872 Fahrenheit, enough to melt lead. Case closed. Today's temperatures are a function of yesteryear's CO2. Therefore, future temperature rise is haunted by the buildup of today's CO2 as it emits into the atmosphere at ever-increasing rates. Now at 3 parts per million per annum versus only 1 part per million per annum only 45 years ago. CO2 emissions are hell-bent for leather ever since the great acceleration post-World War II hit the biosphere like a bolt of lightning, putting human footprints boldly onto nature's course for the very first time ever. Nowadays, it's a human-derived climate, plain and simple. The negative consequences are far-reaching, but start in regions of the planet where nobody lives, nobody sees or hears or senses. For example, number one, the disappearance of Arctic ice is hugely negative for weather patterns throughout the northern hemisphere already happening, as well as threatening to kick into gear runaway global warming as methane hydrates frozen over eons gets released, heating up the planet, thus burning off agriculture. Arctic warming feedback amplifies additional rapid melting of Greenland, which has already knocked the socks off climate scientists when its entire surface turning to slush for the first time in geologic history. The West Antarctic ice sheet, this is number 3, is starting to disintegrate with 3 massive ice shelf collapses since 1995, including a 1 trillion-ton iceberg, a dangerous tipping point already at hand. As such, Miami Beach raises streets by 2 to 3 feet. Number 4, coral reefs are collapsing, especially the Great Barrier Reef, one of the 7 natural wonders of the world, losing 1/2 of its coral in 2017 due to global warming. The reef is home to thousands of species. 5, thermohaline ocean circulation patterns are slowing, endangering Europe with loss of its remarkably temperate climate. Number 6, the release of marine methane hydrates, 20 times more powerful than CO2, especially in the shallow East Siberian Arctic Sea, threatens the start of runaway global warming. Whacking global crops, already US-Soviet joint expeditions discovered 1/2 mile wide zones of methane bubbling to surface, spewing into the atmosphere. Number 7, depletion of ocean oxygen and the most rapid acidification in millennia, threatening the base of the marine food chain. Number 8, back to back 3 serious droughts hit the Amazon rainforest, the planet's lungs, within only a few years. This is unprecedented and extraordinarily dangerous for multiple surrounding ecosystems. Global warming redirects rainfall away. Number 9, northern hemispheric permafrost melting rampantly and deadly dangerous as it now competes with human-caused GHG emissions, which was scientifically measured for 2 years in Alaska. This is an absolute first and suggestive of a major tipping point reversing from a massive carbon sink into a massive carbon emitter in competition with human CO2 emissions. Those samplings of active tipping points have either gone over the edge or close to it, but once amplified over the top, no turning back, hands-free disaster, no more anthropogenic influence required for negative consequences, inevitably leading to big trouble. Big, neon flashing light trouble. Meanwhile, opinions of climate scientists run the gamut from belief that humanity is on death's doorstep within a decade at most, as the ice-free Arctic exposes massive methane, stored in ice hydrates, triggering massive global warming, decimating agriculture, upending the planet into a dystopian world of infighting over essential food and water, or B, dangerous tipping points will be deferred well into the current century, so not to worry, as human ingenuity will prevail over time, or C, climate deniers totally discount anthropogenic global warming. Humanity's fate is in God's hands and or in the hands of charlatan politicians guiding lights to nowhere, other than dystopia, assuredly guaranteed. Essentially, nobody accepts or wants to believe worst-case scenarios such as an extinction event, even though early warning signs of impending extinction are wide open for all to see, assuming they look in the right places, but nobody lives where the red warning lights and bells and whistles and loud sirens blare other than an occasional expeditionary scientist who is belittled, humiliated, and badgered by Americans' current political ruling class. The idiom, Nero fiddles as Rome burns, arises anew with an exclamation point. Indeed, that is where we are. Funny note about the phrase Nero fiddles while Rome burns. Fiddles weren't invented at the time. And Nero wasn't actually anywhere near Rome when Rome was burning. So wherever that phrase came from, there was actually no Nero fiddling. But anyways, it was made up later. I digress. Finishing up, I'm going to quickly hit this from the Washington Post, June 18th. Audi CEO arrested in Germany over diesel emission scandal. And this is what should be happening. Unfortunately, where are the arrests of the oil company CEOs? Where are the arrests of so many people who are responsible for lying to people about climate change? One can only wonder. But let's read this article and see what's going to happen to this guy. The chief executive of Audi, the luxury automaker owned by Volkswagen, was arrested Monday on suspicion of fraud in relation to the German carmaker's emissions cheating scandal. Rupert Stadler, 55, was detained a week after his home was searched, and German prosecutors said he was a focus of their probe into any manipulations of Audi emissions controls. Stadler is the first member of Volkswagen's executive board to be arrested in connection with the diesel emissions investigation. In 2015, Volkswagen was discovered to have been using software during emissions testing to manipulate results. Munich prosecutors said in a statement that Stadler was detained out of concern that he would suppress evidence needed for their investigation. Mark Clothier, a spokesman for Audi, confirmed the arrest and declined to comment further because the investigation is ongoing. He added that the presumption of innocence continues to apply for Stadler. Volkswagen said 3 years ago that as many as 11 million of its vehicles were equipped with software meant to deceive emissions tests, including at least 2 million Audis. The company has pleaded guilty to fraud in the United States and was charged $25 billion in fines, penalties, and restitution for owners and car dealers. Martin Winterkorn, way off, then chief executive, but Winterkorn is an awesome name. Then chief executive of Volkswagen resigned after the carmaker admitted to using the software. Last month, U.S. prosecutors charged Winterkorn, 70, with a conspiracy and wire fraud in relation to the diesel emissions case. The indictment from the Justice Department accused Winterkorn of conspiring with other Volkswagen executives to defraud the United States and of lying to customers about the cars being marketed as clean diesel. This article keeps going on. That's all I'm going to read of this article. I will link it in the description box below so you can check the rest of it out. Are these guys just, is this, just symbolic, these guys are symbolic patsies for maybe, a much larger, conspiracy to defraud, the entire population of the planet as to what is going on with, the CO2 emissions. But I'm glad somebody is, is getting some heat for this stuff. Our reluctance or resistance or absolute failure to hold people accountable for You know, economic, economic crimes, environmental crimes in the United States is legendary right now, because nobody goes down for anything except for two guys for the 2008 meltdown of the economy, and the banking scandal that precipitated that. Surely there were many more people involved, and surely there were many more people that could have been held accountable, and they were not. Indeed, the entire banking industry should have been held accountable on a much higher scale, and they were not. Surely the oil industry can be held accountable in so many different ways. Executives and CEOs could be held accountable for the B2P spill, for oil spills all over the United States and all over the globe, and they are not. They are slapped on the wrist. They are fined. They are, allowed to continue to destroy the environment. And this is how it goes. Hopefully, with great hope, this can change. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. I really appreciate your viewership and your feedback always. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Hope to be back tomorrow with another video. Until next time, peace.